Now wash your hands. Understanding Food Legislation Compliance in a Virtual Reality Restaurant Kitchen. A paper by a bunch of people from the University of Nottingham. With high levels of foodborne illness affecting millions each year, it is important that those working with food are both trained and comply with food hygiene legislation. Behavioural approaches in practical environments are seen as the most effective form of training, and we know that interactivity increases engagement and learning. Serious games are one such approach, but often neglect fun. In this paper we consider how a serious game, or a game with a serious purpose, engages workers with the subject of compliance with hygiene legislation in a complex tension between play and the serious context. The Corrupt Kitchen is a single-player, room-scale virtual reality game. Working at the Paradise Cafe, players have a limited time in which to prepare and cook burgers for the Elvis impersonator convention, balancing the task of cooking with appropriate compliance with hygiene legislation. The design embodies concepts from food hygiene vocational courses as well as general compliance dilemmas. There are a mixture of explicit choices or opportunities for accidental omission. Players must keep meat in the fridge with the door closed, wash their hands after touching raw meat, unblock the fire escape and mop the floor regularly. Players can choose to hire an illegal worker, take cash only, and bribe the health inspector to turn a blind eye to their inevitable infractions. When their time is up, a news report relays the consequences of the player's actions. We studied the game with a convenient sample of 19 participants, half of whom had had practical experience of working in the food industry. After they had played the game, we interviewed them, focusing on their experience of the game, their conduct and their perceived future conduct. Overall, burgers were prepared at the expense of consistent compliance or attention to time-sensitive tasks such as cleaning the floor. Those that did engage with hygiene tasks failed to maintain this consistently throughout. Meat went bad and a burger was set on fire at least once in over half of the games, while hands were infrequently washed and the floor was rarely mopped. We found that there were different aspects to how participants engaged with the fidelity of the kitchen. Experientially, the kitchen was an allowable simplification due to its playfulness. Emotionally, the kitchen was considered as close as one could get to a commercial kitchen due to the perceived time pressure and workload from the task. Legally, those with more experience highlighted the lack of a waste bin or things like detailed record keeping. There were tensions around observed behaviours. Participants expressed a commitment to compliance, but this did not always translate into action. Non-compliance was accounted for as incompetence due to focusing on the primary task. Depending on the act, participants portrayed themselves as game players, for example maximising burger output, or alternatively as chefs, bringing real-world values to bear. When confronted with their behaviours in the interview, players grounded their actions in considerations from the real world, expressing regret at the reported or visible consequences of their actions and with at least a reported conviction that their behaviour would change as a result. In contrast to many training simulations that are not played primarily for amusement, the Corrupt Kitchen is a playful environment and one that is humorous, light-hearted and satirical. However, it is sufficiently aligned to players' own perspectives on regulatory compliance, and this leads us to suggest that integrity of feeling and real-world authenticity, rather than just fidelity of presentation, are useful design goals. These are delivered via game mechanics such as time pressure, multitasking, complaints from the customers, and are not broken by the omission of the waste bin. Including failure to act as a mechanism for non-compliance is also important, as in this regard this reflects a real kitchen environment. While punishment without explanation might seem unfair and poor game design, it is a useful prompt for reflection. Given that players can act badly, are they learning the right lesson, or are we teaching them to be evil? As in the game, incompetence is the most likely reason for real-world non-compliance. However, we reflect that intentional real-life non-compliance is akin to the adoption of dominant strategies in this and other games. For understanding compliance, it's important that these are present. We don't view these as problematic emergent game activities, but as a reflection of the real-life rules that govern behaviour. Players can act as political citizens who comply with the food hygiene requirements, despite these not being the most optimal economic strategy. Those who bypass these are confronted with the consequences of their actions on multiple occasions within the reflective structure of the experience, and we think this might even offer a mechanism to consider how and when individuals may game the law. There is a challenge to design serious game experiences that function for both game players and those more immersed in their roles. Our chefs showed greater empathy towards the in-game injured, and here experience design should allow them to apply their learned knowledge of appropriate behaviours. Our game players were more dispassionate, enacting dominant strategies to maximise profit, and here the design should allow reflection on desirable behaviours outside of the game. The kitchen provides the necessary reflective moments both moment to moment and in the broader experimental design, with the hygiene inspector and the interviewer both embodying the role played by the facilitator in conventional training, supporting necessary debriefing and discussion. We've presented the corrupt kitchen, which speaks to a more experience-based form of training that is currently prevalent in a traditionally knowledge-based industry. We have yet to study the corrupt kitchen as an explicit training artifact, or its efficacy for enabling longer-term behavioural change. In the meantime, please now wash your hands.